Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Property Management 101, and today I'll be sharing with you some best practices when it comes to hiring. There's some other videos that I've released that have some similar aspects to this video that I'll be talking about today, and those videos are titled Mastering Your Interviews as well as Recruiting. I will post the links to those videos in the description. The first best practice that you want to consider when it comes to your hiring process is that you want to hire on desire, not experience. I know I'm probably going to receive some pushback on this one, but what I've found is very common in the industry is that we tend to overvalue experience and tend to undervalue desire. I always see these headlines when it's a property manager post saying must have property manager experience. Although experience is important, I much rather have someone with less experience and more desire to really ensure they're working hard and doing everything they can to position that property for success, rather than someone with more experience with less of that desire. For certain positions, I'm not implying that zero experience is a good thing. But for example, let's say you're hiring for a property manager role and you have a candidate that has 3 years experience as a leasing agent and 3 years experience as a leasing manager or as an assistant manager. To me, that could be a very strong candidate even though they don't have any property manager experience. Personally, when I was hired as a property manager, I had 5 years in a leasing agent role and then I had 4 years as a leasing manager. And when I got to my first asset as a property manager, even though I didn't have any property manager experience, I was very eager for my first opportunity as a property manager. The asset that I was assigned as a property manager was an asset that wasn't nearly as nice of a product as some of our competitors in the market. And even though our product wasn't nearly as nice or as new or offered as many amenities as some of our competition, our asset really outperformed our owners' and investors' expectations, and we were able to outperform our competitors even though we didn't have nearly as nice of a product and I didn't have nearly as much experience as some of the other property managers have. The second practice that you want to consider is you want to have multiple opinions. Regardless of the role you're hiring for, you always want to make sure you have multiple employees involved with the hiring process. This includes reviewing resumes, reviewing applications, conducting interviews, and any other steps that are part of your hiring process. Oftentimes, when you're considering candidates, it's very easy for one employee to miss something, whether it be positive or negative, about that candidate, but it's much harder for two individuals or more to miss that dynamic of that candidate. One key point that I would strongly suggest that you consider when it comes to your hiring process, and I see this as a common mistake in the industry, is you always want to make sure whoever's going to be the direct supervisor of that employee is involved in the hiring process from the start to the finish. I often see this dynamic where maybe it's a maintenance tech or a maintenance porter that the property manager is interviewing and going through the interview process and hiring process with them. And the maintenance supervisor will be the person that will be in charge of that employee in the future, is not involved at all when it comes to that hiring process of that candidate. This is a big mistake. You always want to make sure the person that's going to be supervising this employee has a say-so of who they're hiring, and you want to make sure they have the opportunity to outline things as far as with their expectations of the job. This is a really important step I often see not occur in the industry. I hope you're enjoying this video so far and learning something new. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. And the last practice that you want to consider with your hiring process is you want to review the expectations of the job and the duties of the job. This is going to be really important that you clearly outline what the expectations and the duties are of the job. You do not want to be in a situation where the employee has a much different expectation when they walk into that job for their first day and they really start to get into the flow, the rhythm, and the cadence of the job to what they were expecting. You really want to make sure that every element you can uncover, every element that you can unpack for them, you do so prior to them starting with the role. I would always suggest sharing the expectations and the job duties at least of all the following steps. You want to include it in every job posting. You want to include it in the application process. You want to include it when you conduct interviews. You also want to make sure that you include the job details and expectations in the job offer letter or contract. And you also want to always make sure that you're following up with the job expectations each time you conduct an employee review. By doing this, this should really help minimize your turnover for each one of your positions within your company or at your property. When I hear the often phrase where, hey, this position has a lot of turnover, one of the first things that I always tend to look at is what kind of expectations are we outlining and providing to that employee throughout the interview process and throughout the hiring process. It's really important that the employees have a good expectation of the job, and we just don't have the one-sided dynamic of we have a good expectation what they are as far as experience level and personality, but they don't have a good expectation of the job. You really want to make sure it's a two-way street to ensure both parties ensure this is a good fit for each of them before starting any position. And for today's video recap, here are the 3 practices to keep in mind. Number 1, you really want to make sure you're hiring on desire, not experience. Number 2, you want to collect multiple opinions of each candidate as they go throughout the hiring process. And number 3, you really want to make sure you're reviewing the job details, which includes your expectations, requirements, and duties of the job throughout the hiring process. And I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. Also, if you haven't connected to our LinkedIn and our Instagram page, please make sure you do so for industry news, polls, and video releases. If you have any questions about this video or any of my videos, feel free to comment. I'll be happy to address it for you. Happy leasing!